Hello everyone, welcome to The Green Man. Hope you're all doing good and well. So I'm pleased to say we have two very special guests joining me here today for the first collaboration video on the channel ever. So I'm pleased to say we have two guests here. We have Hector from Chill Dude Like Couch Reviews, and we also have John from JC Rock and Metal Reviews as well. And today we are discussing Metallica's Death Magnetic, which was their 9th studio album, discounting live albums or the cover album. So it's an interesting album. I've been revisiting this one. Came out 2008, produced by Rick Rubin. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with my guests to discuss this. This is specifically a series talking about Dark Horse discs. So what that means is this series is looking at albums that generally are kind of underrated or overlooked by the fan bases of these bands. And I thought Death Magnetic might be a good one to kick off because Metallica, the biggest band, right, in metal, kind of one of the biggest, you could argue, certainly. So we're going to kick off with John, JC Rock and Metal Reviews. So, what was your first experience with this album? What were your initial thoughts with Death Magnetic?
Okay, so this is kind of interesting. I'm a big Metallica fan, but it came out at a time, there was like a period of time when I was kind of away from like the music scene. I had a lot of different stuff going on in my life. So I didn't actually go out and buy this album when it first came out. And I think this was one of the first Metallica albums that actually didn't run out and buy. So I didn't actually listen to it until a few years later when I saw them live. And that was when I got into this album because I saw them live in Mexico City. It was in the year 2012. And they played mostly songs from this particular album, Death Magnetic. One of the songs that stood out for me was the song Cyanide, when I first saw them play live, because in the live show, they had all these screens and they showed they had these animations of these coffins, and then you can see the inside of the coffin and you see all these dead bodies, but one by one these dead bodies were waking up. So it was like people who would just wake up inside these coffins, and then it was kind of very creepy because you see them and they're all trying to get out and they're banging on the top, and it was very creepy for me. I think so for that reason, that song Cyanide really stood out for me. So after that, I went and I got this album, and I always thought it was really good because it was a return to form, because before that they did their Saint Anger, which I didn't hate. A lot of people hate that album. I thought it was decent, but it was more of I think they were trying to be a little too heavy or too new metal, because before that they were doing they did that those Load albums, and that was more they kind of toned down with that grunge sound. And then Saint Anger, I think they tried to be just too new metal, super heavy, and then it didn't work out. And the band was going through some problems. But I think this was a really good album as far as the songwriting is concerned. Now, the big issue with this is the production, where the sound was very compressed. And I didn't really notice it at first, but after more people started talking about it, I did kind of realize that this is all related to the loudness wars. And also keep in mind that this album wasn't produced by Bob Rock, actually the first one that wasn't produced since Justice, I believe. So that was one thing. And there was also they have fixed it, there are other versions of this album that you can download from their website, where they kind of fix that compression problem. But as far as the songs, I think they're all very good. It's just very return to form. It's not another Master Puppets Part 2. It's kind of they took everything they were doing before, and then they took the stuff they did on the Black Album, they took the stuff they did on the Load album, and they kind of took all those influences, but they made some really great thrash metal songs, and so that's why I think it's a decent album. So that's it. Yeah.
Okay, Hector, what did you make of this one?
Yeah, thank you first of all for the invite. So Yeah, well, my first impressions of this album is like when I heard the first singles, the first thing that stood out to me was the drumming didn't sound like it was hitting like a Cracker Jack uh, box or something, because obviously it was an album that was important because it followed an album that was hated by the fans. I didn't hate it. I thought that Saint Anger, if they would have done better sound and production, it's a good album. But when I heard the singles for Death Magnetic, I was actually excited. I did get the album on release date on CD. I don't have it physically with me anymore, but I did get it when it came out. And my first impression listening to the album was that uh, it's a long album at 1 hour and 14 minutes, so it's long and it's 10 songs. And when it was coming out, I was reading a lot that they were comparing more this album, that they were inspired by And Justice for All when they were recording this album. And I kind of see it because there's like long songs and you think the covers, they're the same color. Death Magnetic and And Justice for All is the same gray color. I don't think it sounds like And Justice for All. First of all, I think you can hear the bass on this one. Like JC was saying, yeah, when I was listening to the album yesterday, and it's loud. So I think sometimes it's too loud, the album, but I think it's good. I think it has some tracks that are singles that were really good, and it has some hidden gems too that I think shouldn't be played enough. But I'll speak about those when we speak about our free favorite songs soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I loved it when it came out. I bought it, and actually, that's the first time I saw Metallica on that tour. I saw them twice because I didn't think they were coming to, I was living at Puerto Rico at the time, so I didn't think they were going to Puerto Rico. So I saw them in Tampa, and it was Gojira, Lamb of God, and Metallica. And I was waiting my whole life to see Metallica. So when I saw them, I kid you not, I had one tear.
Oh wow!
Only one.
Yeah.
It came out, only one.
Yeah.
It's not like I started crying and people were like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? No, just one tear. I was like so happy that I saw them, and they
Well, I was a little bit like that when I first saw Iron Maiden. So I know that feeling when you've been waiting a long time to see a favorite band. It can make you go, oh,
because actually they were going to play in Puerto Rico in the 90s in a stadium outside, but it rained and it got canceled, and I was too young, so my parents didn't let me go. And after that, they said that they would come back to Puerto Rico, but that was in 1991, 1992. They didn't come back until 2010. So when they came back, it was a huge deal. I think the tickets sold out in a few hours. And it was the Death Magnetic tour. It was awesome. They played a lot of Death Magnetic, but they played some of the classics. And I think the songs for Death Magnetic sound better live than on the album. So to me, it's a great album. I think people maybe put it down because it came after Saint Anger, and a lot of people at that time they were on the I hate Metallica bandwagon. So they could have put out anything, and people would say, oh, it's bad. But I went with open mind and I liked it. I was listening to it yesterday, and I think it's underrated. Yes. Those were my initial thoughts of Death Magnetic by Metallica.
Yeah, I think I remember when I first listened to this, and I think it was probably about the time it came. I'd been really excited about it. I was like really keen to hear something from Metallica that was maybe, I think I'd heard the people saying it was a bit more of a hark back to their older sound or a thrash style. And I felt that, on my early listens, I really liked this a lot. This album particularly, I remember even listening to it on my working lunches in my first job in London, which was unusual for me to listen to music in my working lunches. I tend not to, I love music, obviously, but I wouldn't normally listen to much music during the day at work because it just wasn't I always get a bit distracted. I get so into the music, I get distracted. But that was an odd time. I actually was listening. I remember listening to Death Magnetic in my lunches. So I must have liked the album quite a bit at that point. And over time, maybe a little less, but I do think it is a very playable album. It's pretty good. And I do see what you both commented on the production point, and I'm almost a little bit contrarian on the production of this album because it is pretty loud, but maybe it's because you know, I don't particularly mind that too much in my listening. So when I was listening to it in the car the other weekend, I listened to it quite loud, and I thought, you know, I actually like it kind of blasting out. It kind of suits the the style of the music a little bit. But that's just me playing devil's advocate with the album, really, because it is loud.
It's a loud album.
But yeah, I like this one quite a bit. And yeah, it's sort of interesting artwork, isn't it? And the concept's quite cool, isn't it? Don't you think? It sort of has the coffin with the electromagnetic field around it. And even when you open up and you get the cover out on this version, on this CD, it's kind of cut out the coffin.
Yeah, they cut it out.
Yeah. It's kind of a neat little idea there.
Yeah.
And I think I read that it was to do with the magnetism of death for celebrity or something. It was kind of this interesting idea and concept. So I like that whole thing as well with the album. And I do think it's pretty solid. So next up, what we're going to do is talk about, so we're gonna each say, well, we think it might be a little bit overlooked, and I think you guys have already touched on that a little bit as well. So we'll also name our 3 favorite tracks when we go around this next time from the album too. So John, JC Rock and Metal Reviews, why do you think it might be a little bit overlooked, you know, considering it came maybe after some anger, like Hector said? And what are your 3 favorite tracks as well?
Going off what Hector said, it was just, there's just a group of these metalheads who, no matter what Metallica do, they're like, oh, it sucks. Yeah. So I think that was the main reason. So all of those like loud voices of these metalheads saying, oh, this album sucks. So they take one thing, like the production, where it's very loud, it's compressed. So, but because of that, one factor is just like all the songs like really suck, but that's not really true. The songs are very good. They're well written. Again, like Hector said, you know, my first experience was listening to this album, hearing them live. So yeah, they are better live. And you know, like I said, there are versions of this album that you can download where they did correct that production problem. So that was the part that was overlooked. There's just like too many of those like loud voices, you know, just saying that like this album sucks just because of these like metal elitists who's like Metallica haters. As far as my 3 favorites, well, I mentioned the first one, Cyanide. That's definitely a favorite for mine. The second one, The Day That Never Comes, that was the first single, and I like that because it had some elements of like those Load albums where they did some of that like cleaner stuff, more of that like alternative metal stuff. But they brought back, you know, those longer songs where, you know, like those And Justice for All songs where they had these different like tempo changes and they had these like really good thrashy parts. And that's why I really like that song. So that's like The Day That Never Comes. And the last one, My Apocalypse, that's just a straightforward thrasher. Yeah. Just, you know, going back to their like Kill 'Em Alls, you know, style, just all out. It's the short. I guess I'm looking at the track list right now. It's the shortest song. It's 5 minutes, and it's just a thrasher. You know, like Metallica like to end their albums with like a really heavy song, and you know, I think some of my favorite songs are like the last songs on all their albums, and that's why, you know, My Apocalypse will be my 3rd favorite. So that's it. Those would be my 3. Mm-hmm.
Cool. So, okay. Yeah, good choices there, I think. Hector.
Yes. Yeah. So why do I think this album is a dark horse? Where, you know, it came after Saint Anger. Also, it was produced by Rick Rubin. And, you know, Rick Rubin, like everyone's like, oh, Rick Rubin's a big deal. But I've read a lot, like Rick wasn't even, like he just sits there and says something and goes. Like, how much production does he do? So sometimes I even think that Rick Rubin is a little bit overrated. Yeah, he has had some good albums, but is he really a great producer? Because what I read is like And also Corey Taylor from Slipknot said that he sits down, he listens, he's like, oh yeah, like he goes, and then they don't see them for months. So how can you say that's producing an album? That's just listening to a song, saying it sucks. Okay, I'll see you in 3 weeks. I'm like, pay me my money. And I think it's a dark horse because maybe a lot of people at that time were like through with Metallica. They were like, oh, Metallica sucks. They haven't been good since like years. So I think at that time, a lot of people, even though if it was good, some people even said it sucked without listening to the album. That's how much hate it got. Yeah. So that's why I think it's a dark horse, because it was an album that was trying to prove something. And you know what? Can you show the cover again? The Death Magnetic cover. If you think about it, I think they did that cover intentionally, like people were saying Metallica were dead. So they did a cover where there's like a coffin. I think it, I don't know if they ever said this, but I believe that they did this because a lot of people wrote them off after Saint Anger, like Metallica were dead. So I think that it's genius that they did an album with a coffin. It might be, I don't know if that's the point, but it's interesting. So naming 3 songs that I love about this album, I think This Was Just Your Life, which is the album opener. It's a very strong opener. And, you know, when they were playing that concert, they were starting with that song. And it starts like, da, na, 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 and, you know, and it gets heavier. So I think it's a good start. And it goes back to those early albums where they had like the Justice for All, the long album start. They had like a long song start the album and one to finish that was usually shorter. So This Was Just Your Life, I think, starts you on the right path for this album. Also, All Nightmare Long is a great song. I love the bass on it. I think it still holds up. It's a fun song, and it's got like a different vibe to it. So it's one that I love. And this album has one of what I would believe is the most underrated Metallica songs ever. And I don't think it's played enough, and that's the Judas Kiss. That song is a great song. I just love when James Hetfield says like bow down. I love the vocals of that song, and it's a long song, and I think it's fun. And I don't know why they don't play that song enough. I think it's one of those hidden gems, those songs that weren't a single, and it's great. And I wish they didn't play this song live when I saw them for the Death Magnetic tour, and I don't know why, because I really always thought that song could have been a lead single too, but I don't know why they don't play it. I think it's great, a very underrated gem of a song. So those are my 3 tracks for Death Magnetic.
Yeah, I love the way that song starts, Judas Kiss, with that riff. You know, really, really cool little opening riff for that track.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah. Yeah, so why do I think this is dark horse? I think you guys have covered most of the reasons I thought this might be a dark horse sort of disc, a gem, well, sort of gem. You know, it came after St. Anger, which was pretty widely disliked and still is by a lot of Metallica fans. And I think it's a little bloated. The album's pretty long. I think one of you have touched on that as well, that it was an hour and a quarter in length, which is a long time. I mean, for a thrash album or this kind of album, I think it's a pretty long time to sit through. And I suppose thinking about the albums either side of it, I mean, what was it? Lulu, which was after this, I think, as well. And it sort of sits in a time when Metallica, a lot of fans are probably by this point tired of them a bit. Maybe, you know, they didn't put out many albums post sort of, you know, I guess kind of post St. Anger. Their output's been it's not been every so often. So when it does come along, it's a bit like, you know, we've been waiting. I mean, it's now been another 5 years since Hardwired as well. So it's, yeah, I think it's one that's just maybe drifts a bit. But when you listen back to this, you realize actually it's really quite good. And the riffing, there's a lot of thought that's gone into it. The structure of the album, I think the structure of the songs particularly, I think was pretty well thought through. When you listen to something like All Nightmare Long and you listen to the breakdown in that, it's awesome. It's like they really sat down and thought about how to put together the songs. And I was watching a bit of the making of this morning, leaving it a bit late for this video, but watching the making of documentary for it. And you could tell they were, I think, I don't know what happened with St. Anger really, but apart from it being, you know, what it was, and the production on it bad and everything, but you know, it did feel like they obviously spent a lot more time and effort kind of thinking seriously about it, and maybe it was a friendlier atmosphere for this album when they were producing the album or recording the album, because I've seen some of the St. Anger footage as well, so maybe that's part of it, I don't know. But yeah, so my 3 favorite tracks, I think the middle of this album is fantastic. Actually, I really like All Night May Long and Cyanide. I found those 2 easy to decide on. I was like, those are going to be 2 of them. All Night May Long and Cyanide are fantastic. But the third one, it took me forever to think what my 3rd favorite track was. I've got to be honest. I'm like, which one do I go for as number 3? And I think I'm going to go with Suicide and Redemption. It's a little on the long side, but once it gets to its climax, it's awesome. You know, Suicide and Redemption, it's a bit on the long side, but once it gets to that climactic moment with Kirk's solo, I think it actually takes off, and it's really cool. So yeah, those are my 3 favorites from the album. So we're gonna go around our last time, our 3rd time now, with where we think this would rank in their entire catalogue. So roughly, where would you have this if you were ranking these albums? So we'll go back to John.
Okay. Yes, for me, somewhere in the middle, I would say, because the top albums will always be Master, Ride the Lightning, Justice for All, Kill 'Em All. I mean, those they're never going to beat. Those are the classics. So you got the 4, those are like my top 4, you know, in any order. You know, 5 would be like maybe like the Black Album. And between, like, I would say either a 6 or 7, it would be either this one or Hardwired, which would be, you know, going back and forth. I'm not really sure which one I like a little better. I maybe like them both like equally. So that's my answer. I would say out of 10 albums, between the 6 and 7 range.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So for me, this album, you know, it's good. There's only one song that I would say delete, and it's the Unforgiven Free.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that as well.
I'm like, why? Like, you forgave him 2 times. Like, that's the only song that I found on the album is like, they just put the title for people always don't forgive him free. That's the only song on that album that I would delete. Where it ranks on the album. So my introduction to Metallica was the Black Album. So my favorite Metallica albums will always be like Master of Puppets, the Black Album, Ride the Lightning, the classics. So this would fall between 6 and 7 too, because you know what? I think I like Load a lot. I don't know why, but I really love Load. Even though, so I think it's somewhere between. I think I like Load and this one better than Hardwire, and obviously at the bottom would be Saint Anger and Lulu. I don't even count this as a Metallica album.
Yeah, I've actually never listened to that, to be honest with you. Yeah,
you haven't. That was more of a Lou Reed album with Metallica playing.
Yeah,
but it got shit on, and Lou Reed took it really personal. But yeah, but they put the Metallica thing in there, but you haven't missed anything, John. But yeah, I think it would rank in the middle. It's not an album that I used to listen to it a lot when it came out, but frankly, when I was listening to it these days, I hadn't heard that album in years, except like the singles and the Judas Kiss that I love. But I would rank it like 6, 7 in that area as well.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much the same. I mean, it's the first 5 albums, Metallica's first 5 albums, including the Black Album, which the Black Album gets attacked quite a bit, and yet that is a very, very good album to me.
A flawless album.
Yeah, it's a great album, really.
The people who attack
it's just because it's super popular, people get put off by super popular things, don't they? But yeah, I think their first 5 albums, they can't. Yeah, Death Magnetic is good, but it's not that good. So for me, I think you're right. I struggle with whether this would come. I think it comes above Hardwired for me, actually, but only by a bit. But I'm kind of a little bit on the whether it comes above Load, because I did like Load quite a bit when I first heard Load. I haven't been back to it a lot, but you know, it's a similar sort of situation. But, you know, I do like a lot of as a riffs man, I do like a lot of the riffs on Death Magnetic. So it may be that it just edges it ahead of load. Say sixth. I'm going to say sixth, I think. So get off the fence and say sixth. Yeah. All right. So I guess that brings us to a natural closure of the first collaboration video on the channel. I just want to say a big thank you to Hector, Chill Dude on a Couch. Do drop him a like and subscribe on his channel. He does, you know, lots of reviews like this channel, but he also does some really interesting interviews with underground up and coming bands. So I do thoroughly recommend his channel. Also, I think his channel's kind of always done, you know, in quite good humor as well. And it's good fun and entertaining to watch. So definitely sub to Chill Dude on a Couch. And I'll drop links in the description box as well afterwards. And JC Rock and Metal Reviews, John, definitely also drop him a like and subscribe. He does a pretty thorough and comprehensive, you know, he does lots of comprehensive reviews on his channel of a lot of, you know, things ranging from classic rock and heavy metal to more modern day heavy metal bands. And I thoroughly recommend you also. He was actually one of the first YouTubers I kind of discovered when I was doing the YouTubing thing. So it's kind of like, I definitely recommend you check out JC Rock and Metal Reviews and drop him a like and subscribe as well. And from me, don't forget to drop me a like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Otherwise, take care, everybody, have a great weekend. And from me, bye for now. And from everyone else.
Bye, everyone.